Now we are going to hear from Priscilla Kedibone Israel, who is the 2016 Trafficking in Persons Report Hero and the Assistant Director of Public Prosecutions in Botswana. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. As introduced, my name is Priscilla Israel. I am the Assistant Director of Public Prosecutions. I'm going to deal with major challenges that Botswana has faced so far ever since the enactment of the Anti-Human Trafficking Act. Botswana, like any other countries, it faces challenges, and the legislation on human trafficking, as already indicated, it's fairly new, and we have noted the following challenges so far. Number one is the funding for information campaigns at national level is scarce. Our government operates basically on a prioritized budget. We look at assisting on issues of HIV/AIDS, and as such, some areas will not be covered as planned, thus are leaving important role players behind. Because when you look at the remote areas, these are places where victims are trafficked from in order to traffic them to for labor purposes in farms and cattle posts. So we have noted that there is a need for more training for frontline officers such as social workers, police, health workers, immigration officers, prosecutors, judges, and etc. And we've looked at the other challenge that we should develop regulations for the Act and develop the SOP to get interagency cooperation. For instance, the victim support and information management is already indicated. Botswana has not yet enacted the regulations for the Act, and therefore there is an urgent need to do that. And then there is a need to strengthen the training for officials already dealing with TIP cases, as mentioned above. And there is no dedicated centers for victims. And therefore, we need to have those, because the situation where you put victims in hotels and other places, it's not viable for victims because it places them to a more danger, because hotels, more people come in, they can easily again be notified. And then number 6, the challenge in sourcing vetted good language translators for victims who don't speak English. I know it's a challenge with many countries, because we have had a situation where we source somebody to translate for us, only to realize that the translator was part of the trafficking circle. So I believe that is something that most of us, we time and again face challenge on. And then there are ongoing cases and completed ones. And I would like to pick only 2 cases that I would like to discuss. And most they'll be sent us through around the Stockholm Syndrome. And I believe that most of us know what is Stockholm Syndrome. Basically, it's when a victim falls in love with the trafficker, or enjoys, or somehow enjoys the traffic and believe that they are not trafficked, as the presentation from Angola stated. So a victim, in this one case, a victim had been trafficked for sexual exploitation, and then somehow the transportation of the victim became a problem, and somehow the trafficker informed the victim that they are married to them. And then the victim, because of the circumstances and her background, fell in love with the trafficker, and then suffered the Stockholm Syndrome. Because basically, if you come from a country like Somalia, where there is no government, where there is a political instability, for you to think of being returned to Somalia, to a place like that, is a challenge for you. So you'd rather be stuck to a place where you believe that you'll have food, you'll have shelter, even though you don't see yourself as trafficked, especially when it's a child aged 15 years old. So they believe that at that age, they believe that they can stand for every abuse that comes their way. So her being prosecuted, she believed that she would be repatriated and sent back to her native country, Somalia. Now, what does she do? Somehow she contacted the trafficker, and the trafficker directed her to sneak out of the shelter, and he impregnated her. So we believe that by him impregnating the trafficker, the victim, it was to make him not to give evidence against him. So because as we speak, they have 2 children together, and the trafficker does believe that now that he has children with the victim, and therefore he will not be prosecuted. So the matter is ongoing before court, and the victim is not really in a position to give evidence due to Stockholm Syndrome. So the best thing that we decided to do was to call a psychologist and the social worker who handled her to come and give evidence in court, because we know that as a fact that it's not all victims will be able to give evidence in court. And it does not mean that if a victim cannot give evidence or is unable to give evidence in court, therefore there is no case. So what about the children? The question is, can you stop the prosecution because of these 2 children? Because these children too are victims. So it's a big challenge, and I believe that in this house, we should look into this kind of an issue and discuss and come up with a solution. What do we do with the children? Are we going to deny the children to have access to the father? Because their father is a perpetrator, their father is an accused person. It doesn't matter whether they were fathered because somebody was trying, because when they were fathered, somebody was trying to cover up his deeds, not the best interest of the children. So this is a challenge that we face, and I believe that in many countries, the traffickers, they come up with this smart way of stopping prosecutions. And then the other issue now is a case where a child was trafficked at the tender age of 2 years. And this child was trafficked by the mother. So the trafficker in this scenario is the mother, not the husband to the trafficker. And somehow the trafficker made the husband believe that this was their child who she had given birth and left at her native country, and she had gone back later to collect the child. So instead of collecting the actual child, then he kidnapped this child and crossed the border to Botswana with this child. So now this child is 13 years old as we speak. And then somehow the trafficker went back to the native country, and she was prosecuted for human trafficking and convicted and sentenced to jail. And I believe at this point she's out, and she just disappeared in thin air. And upon being prosecuted, and she revealed where the child was. And that country, of course, through mutual legal assistance, they requested for the repatriation of the child. And basically, because this is a matter that involves a child, and the best interest of the child is the center of this case, so we registered the matter before court. Now the issue is, here is a 13-year-old child whose DNA is tested against the other father, and we find that the father in the native country is the actual father, not the father that this child has been growing up believing that is the father. So the child is told the results, and the child does not want to meet with the biological father. And the child insists that this man is my father, trafficked or not trafficked, biologically or not, but this is my parent. And you know, a 13-year-old child, they need to be heard. We cannot just take a child and move this child from Botswana to a native country, especially when the kind of life that she has been living all these years is going to be totally, not by half, different from the kind of life that she'll be subjected to if she goes back to the real father. And then now the family, the father, their father and the family, they are saying that this is our child, trafficked or not trafficked, biologically or not, we will stand with this child, and we don't want this child to go back to her native country. So we are stuck. It's a life case. We are stuck in court. What do we do? Do we take this child take her back to the native country and dump him there? What is the best interest of the child? So my challenge here today, what I want to talk about is, okay, yes, there is trafficking, but what where trafficking involved children affects the rights of the children? What are we saying? What is the world saying about it? Because here is a child who has been born out of the trafficking, out of exploitation of a woman. And when you prosecute the trafficker, what about the children's rights? What about, do we forbid this man from seeing his children? What do we do about these children? He is a child who has been trafficked at the age of 2 years, and he has bonded with his father. So what do we do about the biological father who has never known his child for more than 13 years? And what about the best interest of this child? So the question is, what does human trafficking say about the best interest of children? This is one thing as prosecutors and judges that we should look into. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The situation is very distressing. Thank you for bringing these stories to our attention. And